So 2.1 neuromuscular responses to exercise, physiology unit. So the neuromuscular control of movement. When we see a stimulus, so for example, basketball coming towards us, our receptors, our eyes, relay information using sensory neurons to the brain with electrical impulses. The brain is part of the central nervous system and is responsible for coordinating responses to stimulus. The brain then sends a nerve impulse to the muscles. It sends the impulse along a motor neuron. The motor neuron is made up of a long axon with a myelin sheath covering it. The myelin sheath allows the wave depolarization and action potential of the electrical impulse, so it can travel along the neuron in a jumping action, also known as saltatory conduction. Saltatory conduction allows the impulse to move a lot faster across the neuron, making the response time to the stimulus much less than if the impulse was just traveling across the axon. When the impulse reaches the end of the neuron, it comes to a synapse, which is the gap between the neuron and muscle. This is also known as the neuromuscular junction. ACH in vesicles are released over the synapse when the impulse reaches the end of the neuron. ACH is a neurotransmitter, so if enough of it reaches the muscle, then muscle fiber, then the impulse will start again in the muscles, making them being able to stimulate and contract. In basketball, it is important for a player to respond quickly to different stimuluses. For example, intercepting a pass requires quick reaction time to a stimulus, the stimulus being a poor pass being thrown. Saltatory conduction therefore speeds up the response time as the nerve impulse can reach the muscle faster, so they are able to intercept the ball, like this player here, or get a block like this player here. At the end of a motor neuron, there are extensions of the neuron called motor units. A motor unit is defined as a nerve and any of its fibers it controls. As mentioned before, synapses are where a part of the motor unit meets the muscle fibers, here, as shown here. Therefore, the motor unit is responsible for transferring the nerve impulse to the muscle fibers. The size of a motor unit depends on the size of the muscle contraction it controls. A large muscle contraction will require and therefore recruit a large motor unit that stimulates powerful, fast glycolytic fibers to bring about the large contraction. On the other hand, a small muscle contraction will recruit a small motor unit to bring about the contraction using slow oxidative fibers. The number of motor units also depends on the size of contraction. A large contraction will require as many motor units as possible to generate the power needed, but not that many motor units. Few motor units will be recruited for small contractions as less power is required for them. So during the multi-stage fitness test, the temperature of the body increases as the intensity of the test increases. The temperature increases as the muscles are working harder at higher intensities and are therefore producing more heat. As the intensity increases, the muscles recruit larger motor units to stimulate fast glycolytic fibers, which produces more heat and also lactic acid, which is also shown in this graph here, the blood lactate during the test. So it shows that the blood lactate increases as the intensity increases, as the fast glycolytic fibers are being recruited by the large motor units, and therefore are producing lactic acid. So sports application of this, in basketball, different size motor units will be recruited for different size contractions. So the first one being when a player jumps for a rebound, they exert a lot of power from the muscles, and therefore a large motor unit will be recruited to stimulate the fast glycolytic fibers to generate the power for the contraction. But on the other hand, when a player is just examining the court with his eye muscles, like this player here, a small amount of small motor units will be recruited to bring about the contraction. As it's only small, it's only the eye muscles moving. So yeah, small motor units and not many of them. So muscle spindles. Muscle spindles are constantly sending information in the form of impulses to the spinal cord, which is the central nervous system. It sends changes in the strength and acceleration of the muscle. They are made of extrafusal and intrafusal fibers that are connected to a tendon at both ends. When one stretches, the other one shortens, like an antagonistic pair. Muscle spindles also stimulate reflexively a muscle contraction to prevent overstretching and fiber damage. This is known as the stretch reflex. When the muscle spindle is stretched too far, the spindle sends an impulse via a sensory neuron to the spinal cord. The spinal cord then sends an impulse straight back via a motor neuron to the overstretched muscles. It acts to shorten the muscle by lengthening its antagonistic pair and inhibiting its contraction, which will pull on the tendon around the joint and shorten the overstretched muscle. So as an example, when a doctor hits a knee with a little mallet, he's hitting a tendon on the front of the knee, which pulls and stretches the quadricep muscles and lengthens it. The muscle spindle then sends an impulse to the spinal cord as it's been stretched. The spinal cord then sends one immediately back to the hamstring to inhibit its contraction and lengthens. This pulls on the tendon around the joint to shorten the quadricep, and at the same time pulls the lower leg portion out into extension, as shown here. So the leg comes up from flexed into extended. The stretch shorten cycle is made up of 3 stages. The eccentric stage, which is when the most amount of potential elastic energy is stored in the lower legs. And this is sort of in section D here. And then concentric, amortization. This is the stage, this is the time period between eccentric and concentric. Basically, this is the, where's my mouse? There it is. This is the pushing out of these legs, the fast movement. So faster this movement and straightening of the legs, the more power will be generated. And then the concentric stage is when the stored elastic energy is combined with the concentric contraction to produce the energetic jumping motion shown here. So this is the upwards phase, which is concentric, and then the downwards phase is eccentric, and in the middle here, this is the amortization. So a sporting example, when a basketball player is bounding, as in jumping up to dunk the basketball, the muscles go through all 3 stages of the stretch shorten cycle to generate enough power for the player to get enough air time in the air to dunk the ball into the basket. The Golgi tendon organ is another proprioceptor, so muscle spindle is a proprioceptor and the Golgi tendon organ is the proprioceptor. These detect the degree of tension generated by a muscle. When more tension is created, more impulses will be sent to the central nervous system from the Golgi tendon. If there is too much tension generated by the muscle, As a reflex action, the Golgi tendon will send an impulse to the spinal cord, which will then send one back to inhibit the contraction of the muscle, known as the orogenic inhibition, in order to protect the muscle from a dangerous buildup of tension. So this protective reflex action is called the inverse stretch reflex. And this is shown in this diagram as you see the feedback response to the spinal cord, the reflex arc, if you like. Yeah. So this has been Neuromuscular. Thank you for watching.